Hello, and welcome to the Nonfiction Authors Association Podcast. Today's session is our monthly replay from the archives. They date all the way back to 2013 when NFAA founder Stephanie Chandler started recording weekly teleseminars with experts selected to help you write, publish, promote, and profit with your nonfiction books. NFAA members have access to all 400 plus of these recordings, and you'd be surprised at how many of these are still useful today, such as the one you're about to hear. I'm Carla King, and I've been your host for the weekly podcast since April 2022, and I'm happy to have you with us today. I'd like to encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can find the podcast live stream and comment and ask questions. Just search for the Nonfiction Authors Association on YouTube and you'll find us. We want to respect your time, so most events last under 30 minutes, though we occasionally include a session from the Nonfiction Writers Conference, which runs about 45 minutes. If you're new to us, membership levels include a free basic membership, but please explore benefits of the paid levels, such as our author advisor email sent every week. If you're new to us, membership levels include a free basic membership, but please explore benefits of the paid levels, such as our author advisor email sent every Friday featuring curated media leads and links to exclusive member content. Members can also participate in our very popular mastermind group we call the Author Brainstorm Exchange, and you'll get access to our private community on Facebook too. Discounts are available for our year-round Nonfiction Book Awards program, the annual Nonfiction Writers Conference, and our book marketing and book publishing master courses, both with optional professional certification. Our awesome partners also offer discounts for their products and services, and these include Lulu, Findaway Voices, Office Depot, Ingram Spark, and others. We'd love for you to join us at nonfictionauthorsassociation.com and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And now, here's today's replay.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our teleseminar series for the Nonfiction Authors Association. Today's session is with Kristina Darling, and we're going to be talking about how to locate and apply for grants to support your writing projects. What a cool topic. I'm your host, Stephanie Chandler. Appreciate you spending time with us today. And now I'd love to introduce our guest today. Kristina Marie Darling is the author of 34 books, including Difficult, Essays on Contemporary Feminist Poetry, which is forthcoming with Black Ocean. Her work has been recognized with numerous residency programs and awards. She also currently serves as editor-in-chief of Tupelo Press and Tupelo Quarterly. She's an opinion columnist for the Los Angeles Review of Books, a contributing writer at Publishers Weekly, a staff blogger at the Kenyan Review, and a freelance book critic at the New York Times Book Review. In 2019, she was named to the US Fulbright Commission's roster of senior specialists. Kristina, that is such an impressive resume. Welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for the introduction. I will do my best to live up to it.
Well, productivity is definitely one of your strengths, I think. So you have done a lot of work using grants and also writers' residencies, which we'll be talking about shortly. And I think that a lot of writers think that grants are maybe only available to nonprofits and things like that, but that's not necessarily true. So could you start by sharing with us some of the potential opportunities that nonfiction writers might find when they're seeking funding for their projects?
Absolutely. So for any individual artist or nonfiction writer, there's usually grant funding available at the local, state, and national level. For example, an artist living in Chicago will likely qualify for project funding from his or her city or county. So every city or county has an arts council, and they usually offer grants for individual writers or artists to complete specific projects. For example, if you need to travel to an archive to finish your nonfiction book, they will give you funds to achieve that. So there's usually funding available from the writer's city or county as well as state funding. So for example, for that artist living in Chicago, they'll qualify for something from their city, but also they'll qualify for the Illinois Arts Council. And then grant funding is also available on the national level, so an NEA grant or an NEH grant or something like that. But what most people don't know about is there are tons of private foundations, such as the Kittredge Fund, the Elizabeth George Foundation, and the Ora Lerman Trust, all of which fund individual writers whose work supports their mission. And what it all comes down to is research. Most of the time, writers simply don't know about all of the rich and wonderful opportunities that are available to them. So in addition to all of these grants, all of these private foundations that are hoping to help out artists and writers, we're witnessing a veritable proliferation of residential fellowships for writers. And many of these are specifically geared toward nonfiction writers. And so the idea is that an art center will give you the gift of time, space, and community just to pursue your nonfiction book. Many of these residential fellowships attract creative practitioners from all around the world. For example, when I was a fellow in residence at the Kimmel Harding Nelson Center for the Arts, we had artists from China. We had a wonderful translator, a photographer from Bulgaria, a composer from California. People came from all over the world to Nebraska City to find community and work on their writing. It was so inspiring. And it really helps you, network with artists outside of your chosen discipline. So I had the pleasure of meeting composers, as well as other writers, sculptors, photographers, and it definitely expands your sense of what is possible within your nonfiction project. And I will say that like grants, most people are only aware of the most visible grants or fellowships. Like most people know about the NEA, the NEH, Yaddo, McDowell, and all of those highly publicized opportunities. But there are so many other exciting grants as well as exciting residency programs. And many of these residency programs offer travel stipends, great food, and community if you're just willing to do your research.
So, wow, that was so much amazing information. And I have to say, I don't know that our community is familiar with the NEA and the NEH grants and some of those others. Can you just tell us what those are about?
Yeah, so those are like a national competition for, I think they alternate. 1 year they'll do poetry, the next year they'll do prose, but it's just a national competition, and the winners receive $25,000 to pursue their book. So yeah, I think it's definitely worth applying for those kinds of highly visible and much publicized opportunities, but also have a backup and look into some of these private foundations that are well-kept secrets within the grant writing community, because there won't be as many applications, and the money will still get the job done. So I would say do your research, apply to a wide range of opportunities, the highly visible ones, but also the lesser-known opportunities.
So when you say do your research, are you talking, should we be doing internet searches, going to the library? How would you go about looking for these types of things?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think that's something that writers struggle with. They just don't know where to go. But one resource that I would like to introduce, I call it the database. It is called grantspace.org, and they have culled a selection of resources. So this is a website that will take you to the organization's own list of curated opportunities for individual writers and artists, as well as a searchable database of foundation grants to individuals. But they also offer webinars and online training modules to help you strengthen your grant writing skills. So grantspace.org is a really great place to look. Artgrants.blogspot.com is a very comprehensive list of funding for individual artists and for very specialized grants. A lot of times foundations will give grants to specific types of nonfiction writers. For example, women nonfiction writers, nonfiction writers of Cuban descent. So very particular types of writers and particular types of projects. So for those specialized grants, there's a website called womenarts.org, and they have a tab that says funding resources, and then you'll click on sources for individual artists. There are numerous other really informative websites that list opportunities for grants regularly, so funds for writers and editors. Rice University also maintains a wonderful directory that includes grants for creative nonfiction as well as more academically inclined book projects. So if, for example, you need to go to an archive and complete research, or you're looking for a travel to collections grant to do work in a specific library or collection for an academic nonfiction book, you'll find a lot of those opportunities on Rice University's database. So that's the really good one for academic writers.
Wow, this is just so much great information, and I'm thinking about our listeners. This is probably the day to join us so you can get this recording if you don't already have access to our recordings, because...
A quick question. Would you like information about where to find out about residencies as well?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so there's
Why don't we actually, Kristina, can you hold that until we talk about residencies? Let's hold that for a minute, because I want to talk a little bit more about the grants opportunities. And I'm just going to add, grants.gov is a big government one. It's not writer specific at all by any means, and you may not even find anything writing related, but I wanted to mention that one as well. It's interesting because occasionally I hear an interesting story about a grant, and several years back someone had introduced me, and I wish I could remember the gal's name, but she had applied for a grant to teach entrepreneurship across the U.S., and she received a 6-figure grant that let her travel for a year teaching her entrepreneurship programs. And I just thought that was so amazing that that kind of thing exists out there. So,
absolutely. Yeah, that's a great addition.
So many creative opportunities for writers who may or maybe also speak or teach or have other businesses. So, wow, thank you for sharing so many great resources with us. So let's say you find a resource or a grant, that opportunity, and you want to apply for it, what is that process like?
Yeah, so many grants like the Kittredge Fund or the Elizabeth George Foundation will ask for an initial letter of inquiry, which describes the project, its scope, the budget, and your credentials for undertaking the project. And so the purpose of this initial letter of inquiry is for the foundation to get to know you a bit and to ascertain whether or not it's a potential match, whether your work supports their mission and their purpose, before they ask you to send additional and often much more comprehensive materials. So once you've submitted your letter of inquiry and they write back asking you for more, the materials are often a lot more comprehensive, and in some cases, as with the Elizabeth George Foundation grant, it's as many as 6 letters of reference. But as you draft your initial letter of intent, there are specific questions you'll need to address if you're going to win over the application committee. So the first question is, how much money are you requesting? And that's actually a more complex and loaded question than people like to think. I had a colleague who he wrote into a very small foundation asking for $80,000. He was going to just take the year off, travel the world, and write his book and not work his usual job. And so the problem was that was their whole budget. And that would have taken away from maybe 10 or 20 other artists who maybe requested smaller, more reasonable amounts. So in general, when you're applying to a smaller foundation, make your request small and reasonable. And if you need to, you can just apply for more than one grant. So you want to choose your funding target and say how much money you're requesting. The second question you'll need to address is the nature of the project for which funds are being sought. So you want to include a brief, say 100 to 200 word description. And then the next paragraph, like for each of these questions, you can simply dedicate a paragraph of your letter, right? Funding target, description of the project. The next kind of paragraph or bullet point would be, how does the project support the grant agency's mission? And so to address this question, you'll need to see if the funding source to which you're applying has a mission statement. And sometimes these can be very specialized, like with the Kittredge Fund, which is aimed at artists and writers in early stages of a promising career, or the Elizabeth George Foundation. They make grants to prose writers who are unpublished. So you want to situate your project in relation to the grant agency's existing mission. And so the next kind of bullet point on that list for the letter of inquiry that you want to address is, why are you the one who's best suited to carry out this project? So you want to give specific details about your credentials, which may include formal training that relates to the project, publications in that genre, as well as awards, honors, and recognition, and all of that good stuff. And then the last kind of bullet point is just, how will the funds be used? So many applicants actually use this project or this project statement section to talk about like artist residencies, writing conferences, workshops, training they wish to avail themselves of, and then explain how that will assist with the completion of the project.
Wow. So it kind of parallels a query letter to a publisher, right? So you
Absolutely. Definitely. The query letter is a genre, and once you've mastered it, it's like mastering the sonnet or a villanelle or the lyric essay. You can take it any direction you want to go.
That's awesome. And then are there like rookie mistakes that people commonly make with this process?
Oh, most definitely. So I've served on a number of juries for both artist residencies and grants. And a lot of the mistakes tend to be similar across the board. So when, a writer is in a situation where they have to submit a project proposal or a cover letter and a work sample, the most common pitfall is that there is no discernible connection between the project proposal and the work sample. So you're probably wondering, why is this a pitfall? And this is because the work sample, if you're pairing it with a project proposal or a letter of intent, the work sample is intended to show that the applicant has the technical facility to carry out the proposed project. So the work sample supports the project proposal in all cases. So the second common mistake is, you're doing a grant application and you outline 3 or 4 different things that you're kind of working on. This is a pitfall because the jury might wonder if the applicant lacks focus. So single-mindedness of purpose with grant applications. You want to choose a specific project, even if you have 3 or 4 things percolating, choose one that will appeal to that particular selection committee. So another common pitfall is, someone's doing an application and they choose very new work that they're excited about but may lack polish for the writing sample. One more pitfall is excerpting much longer works, and this is especially an issue with nonfiction applications. So excerpting much longer works for the writing sample without offering the context or the background for the jury to understand and appreciate the work. Because the thing you have to remember is that the people reading your application are usually not specialists in your particular topic. So you use the first chapter of a book project. It's a really great strategy, and it saves you all of that problem of, the selection committee lacking the background to understand and appreciate your work. And just one more tip follow up with your references and make sure they're responsible about sending their rec letters if they are required for an application. Because a lot of times if an application is incomplete, it will not be reviewed and you'll just automatically get rejected. So choose reference letter writers that will be responsible for you, and just don't hesitate to follow up with them. It's part of their job. So yeah, those are the most common mistakes. And yeah, if you can avoid those mistakes, you're golden in general.
That sounds like amazing advice. And you mentioned jury a couple of times. So are those who receive the grants usually chosen by several people, a group of peers, or how is that typically decided?
So that's a good thing to keep in mind too, because so in general with a grant or a residency or, many other funding opportunities, you'll have a panel of readers who rate and score applications, and usually the organization has internal criteria for how applications are scored. So a lot of it will be the strength and the relevance of the project, the artistic merit of the work sample, but sometimes these scoring sheets that the jurors get are very specific. I recall being on a jury where they asked about the first page of the work sample, the opening. So yeah, every organization is slightly different in its criteria, but the thing to bear in mind is that the juries rotate. So some years, a place like Yaddo or McDowell will have a very experimentally minded jury. Other years it will be a very traditional jury. They rotate them in some instances every year, in some instances every 2 years, in some cases every application cycle gets a new jury. So it's definitely, if you're not accepted or you're not granted funding, reapply because your application will be seen by different eyes.
Wow, wonderful advice. All right, well, I'm hoping everyone's going to go out and look for some grants after listening to all of that. That's amazing. And I'm so glad we have a little bit of time left because I definitely would love to talk a little bit about these residency programs, because I think that a lot of our community members really don't even know that these things exist, or maybe they think that residency programs are for, true career writers, whereas a lot of our community members are maybe writing their first book and it ties into their business, or they just want to write one book, whatever the case may be. Kristina, tell us what a residency is and what kinds of opportunities are out there.
Yeah, so a residency is basically a community of working artists, and it's run by like an art center that will grant you time, space, and community to pursue a specific project. And a lot of the time, like if you go to a residency, like when I was at Yaddo, every meal is prepared for you. And you don't have to worry about housekeeping or cleaning. All you have to do is write and participate in a vibrant arts community. So I cannot say enough good things about the people I've met at artist residencies, because the conversations I've had there have really expanded my sense of what's possible in my own work, and really challenged me in a way that I think is productive for writers. So in addition to time and space, there's the added bonus of just meeting really interesting people. And so there are a couple of really good databases that I'd like to share with you.
Great.
Where you can find out about these kinds of opportunities. So for domestic opportunities within the United States, go to the Alliance of Artist Communities. It's artistcommunities.org. And the site is searchable by residency location, discipline, deadline, application process, so whether it's an open application versus by nomination only, and funding structure. And what's really useful about this site is that each entry on the website displays the number of applicants versus the number of artists in residence. So then you can strategize, right? If the acceptance rate is 10%, then you'll say, okay, maybe I need to apply to a couple of other ones that are more open to emerging artists. So for strategizing, the Alliance of Artists Communities is also really good. For international opportunities, Residencies is very comprehensive. It's searchable by country, funding structure, discipline, and deadline. It also has the site, Residencies, has a directory of grant funding sources that is organized by world region. So if you need money to travel to the residency, they've also got that covered, and there's resources available to help you with that. For international residency opportunities, transartists.org and residencyunlimited.org will also have a slightly different selection of opportunities.
Can you say those again, transartists.org?
Yeah, transartists.org and residencyunlimited.org.
Wonderful. Oh my goodness. And then so a residency where you go and you have this wonderful unlimited time to write and they're feeding you and all of your obligations are out of the way. How long does a residency usually last? Is it a week? Is it a month? Is it longer than that?
Oh, it's completely up to you. So a lot of times when you apply for a residency, you'll request a chunk of time. So the first time I went to Yaddo, I requested 3 weeks because that was all I needed to finish my project. The third time I went to Yaddo, I had a much more ambitious and, at the time, unrealized project. So I requested 6 weeks. So a lot of times you'll apply other residencies, like, for example, the Brush Creek Foundation in Wyoming. You apply for a specific month, and you go there with a cohort of artists who all arrive, say, the 1st of March and leave the last day of March. So you request, either a specific month, a chunk of time, but there are artist residencies of all different lengths. You can go to, say, the Hambidge Center for 2 weeks to 2 months. There's also longer residencies, like the Helene Wurlitzer Foundation of New Mexico offers a 3-month residency in Taos. So once again, it's the importance of doing research. You can, whatever chunk of time you need for your book, you can find it if you're willing to put in the work of doing the research.
Wow, this has been so interesting. Kristina, is there anything else we should know or that I've not asked you about yet?
I would just say, depending on what time of year you're applying to artist residencies, there can be significantly more or less applications. So for strategic value, this is something to keep in mind. So most people apply to residencies in the summer because this is when academics, teachers, college professors are off. So if you're going to apply to residencies in the summer, you want to apply to a lot more programs because they just get flooded. But a lot of times in the winter, spring, fall, there's not nearly as many applications. So supposing you have a dream residency, right? You've always wanted to go to Yaddo, or you've always wanted to go to Ragdale or some other wonderful art center. Applying in the off season can give you a little bit of an edge in terms of the competitiveness of the applicant pool.
Wow, this has been absolutely fabulous. I know you offer some services as well, so can you tell our listeners about what it is that you do and how they can connect with you?
Yeah, thanks so much for asking about my small business. I have a consulting business, Penelope Coaching and Consulting, and we offer application coaching, professional development coaching, manuscript consultations, and book publicity. So you can find us online at penelopeconsulting.com, or feel free to contact me directly at Kristina@PenelopeConsulting.com. And I hope to hear from you soon.
And that's Kristina with a K, right? Thank you
Yes,
so
perfect.
much. Yeah, Kristina Marie Darling, thank you. We really appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We conduct these interviews every week with an archive episode once per month. Find our podcast schedule and replays on the events tab at nonfictionauthorsassociation.com. Or better yet, subscribe to us on YouTube and get notified when the next podcast is available. If you like this episode, please consider giving us a thumbs up, and you're always welcome to use the comments to tell us what you liked and what you'd like to hear next. Thank you, and see you next time.